Talks in Augusta continue today with Democrats looking to pass what they call a continuing services budget. Republicans say it's an effort to pass a majority budget without two-thirds support. Keenan Mills has the latest from the State House.
This continuing services budget preserves the status quo while all of this other uncertainty plays out.
The proposed supplemental budget was killed after Democrats and Republicans in the Senate couldn't come to agreement. Last Friday, the Appropriations and Financial Affairs Committee passed a new budget. On Thursday, the House took up the measure that would fund state government for the next 2 years. It was met with Republican opposition in the manner it was presented.
We were sitting down in the committee on Friday, and I think it was around 11:30. One of the staff came in and handed us a piece of paper, and we were told then we're going to be voting out a budget today.
This is overspending. We need to make cuts. This is not making any cuts whatsoever. We need to be a body that works for the people of Maine, and we need to step up. And right now is the time. And passing this is not working for the people of Maine.
The last two budget cycles, Democrats have passed what Republicans call a majority budget. They lift the emergency measure, which needs two-thirds approval, pass the budget with a majority of Democratic votes, then move to adjourn session and start the 90-day timer for the budget to take effect.
A continuing services budget that takes care of those truly urgent items from the supplemental, filling the man care gap and protecting our northern forests. It also provides funding for the very important services and programs that Maine people need in the upcoming biennium.
According to Democrats, contested items proposed by the governor in the biennial budget are not included.
Those taxes are not in this budget, so I don't want people to think that if people vote for this, they're voting for those taxes. There are no new positions. There are no new state-funded positions in this budget.
Keenan Mills, WABI News, Augusta.